This is the being of your ancestors. This is the most important being there is. This being has been passed through generations, extending back hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of generations to the time before men were men and women were women, and they resembled more like plants than anything else. And this is the being that was there all along, that was passed through the lineage to the present day. And this being it's really too much to say what this being is. It was given to me by my own father after he returned home from the killing fields. He walked into the tent and he rummaged around in his little sack that hung from his belt, and he pulled out this bean for me. Primogenitor. I'm the firstborn. I inherited the bean, and I was told to guard the bean with my life. This bean is the most important thing in my existence. I will kill for it. If anybody were to come into the tent and try to take this bean from me, wrest it from my possession, I would kill them. This bean is the reason that I'm alive. I can't imagine a time when people would be without their sacred bean. Not only do I protect this bean protects me. I'm looking at it, but really, for the more sensitive, discerning eye, it's clear this being is deep within me. Have you found your own being yet? The one object that orients you. The one object it seems I've given up everything for this being, even though it was simply given to me. It's so beautiful. This being. Someone once tried to tell me that there are millions, perhaps billions of beings on the planet, and if there are other planets hosting life throughout the universe, perhaps trillions of planets, that there might be beings or being-like organisms, entities on these trillions of planets. And that how could my being be special when it's surrounded by an infinitude of beings? Don't understand the simplest things, do they? This being was handed to me by my father, which was handed to him by his father, by his father, by his father, by his father. Untold generations past this one being. And look, It's still clean. It's still intact. It hasn't splintered or decayed. It hasn't sprouted. We're talking millions of years of successive reincarnations of the same being through different families, transmigrating across the millennia. This being was in the pocket of thousands of people before me. And therefore, it's not just like any other being. It's a sacred being. Do you know, if I were dying of hunger, and there was nothing that I could eat, and that perhaps if I ate this bean, it might sustain me longer, so that maybe food would be coming shortly here to save me, I still would not eat this bean. This is the eternal bean. This is the bean of beings. This is the being that comes before all being for me. So I would die, and I would hold out this bean in the palm of my hand, so that whoever found my corpse could take the bean and start a new lineage from that point onward. And of course, it's clear that if they found a bean in my hand that I had not consumed, and I died of starvation, that alone would be the message, telling them it's a sacred bean. It needs to be preserved at all costs, at the expense of one's life, if necessary. Now, other people may have other objects. Some person had a peanut, which is very close to a bean. And they had a peanut that they handed down through the generations over thousands and thousands and thousands of generations. And we had an argument once whether their peanut was as sacred as my bean. Now, you can imagine who won that argument. How could a peanut be as sacred as a bean? I don't care if it started at the same time in prehistory as the bean did. The bean is in my family tree. The bean is in my genealogy. The bean is my lineage. The bean is what makes us us. Without this bean, we don't even know who we are. That's how important it is. Now, my name is Mark Benet. It's Mark Bean A. Mark Bean A. That's what I'm talking about. Life on Earth. Life on Earth. It's secondary to whatever entity creates your identity. This being. Nations go to war over a being. The being becomes a god. We worship the being. You think it's arbitrary, a being, but like I said, this being has been passed through my family tree for untold generations, millions of years, from the time before there were human beings. Other organisms that preceded us passed the being from family to family. And after I die and give it to my firstborn, who gives it to his firstborn, who gives it to his firstborn, it'll go all the way into artificial intelligence, and perhaps even the nature of the being will change Maybe it will become less quote-unquote organic, because perhaps it was something other than a bean before it became a bean. Who knows what it has been? Now it's a vegetable. Maybe at one point it was a mineral. And maybe at some point farther down the line it will become more animal-like. Right? Maybe it's one stage behind its possessor. I'm an animal, it's a vegetable. When my ancestors were more vegetative, it was perhaps a mineral. And then, in the future, when my descendants are more artificial, this will be an animal. Perhaps it will be like me. Perhaps I will be this being. And maybe the artificial creatures are so much larger, and I will be the being that is 6 foot tall. There's a lot of possibilities here when you put the being at the forefront of existence. But that's the key. So many human beings today are lost because they don't know what is the most important object in their lives. They don't know what to worship. They don't know the centerpiece of their religion. This being is clarity. Clarity. I know why I'm doing what I'm doing, when I'm doing it, where I'm doing it. I have all those answers packed into this little legume. So you can see that there's nothing arbitrary or trivial or insignificant about this being. There may be trillions of beings in the universe, but not this one. I would kill to preserve the sanctity of this being. You would too, if you had something like this in your family. This being is what makes my family more special than your family. This being is what makes my family the most important family on the planet. It justifies all of our condescension, all of our superiority, all of our disguised tactics for justifying and perpetuating world domination according to the being. You don't even know what's inside this bean. You just presumed that it's a quote-unquote bean. Carbohydrates, protein. You're not using your brain. Obviously, if this was just about carbohydrates and protein and minerals and nutrients and vitamins, it wouldn't be that valuable. And it wouldn't endure the vicissitudes of time. The countless centuries, look, it's perfectly intact. There's no way that this is a simple organism. There's so much more to this being than you can possibly imagine. Think of it for a moment. Thousands and thousands of human beings and vegetative life forms before those human beings concentrated the entirety of their sentience, of their consciousness into this being. This has absorbed the sentience of millions of beings throughout time. This is like a capsule of the mind. Do you know? Do you know what your most tragic day on Earth will be? I know. This being told me so. I know when it all ends. The most tragic day. I don't want to. But I have a feeling that I will. I don't know how my ancestors did it. How my father before me did it. But there's one thing that I haven't told you yet about this being. Is that every day, every hour within the day, and every minute within that hour, and every second within that minute, it emits a signal, which I hear as a voice. A constant refrain, an invitation, but really most deeply a command. Over and over and over. Like a drop of water on my forehead. It's about this frequent. Ping, 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 ping. The reason this is the most sacred being in the universe is that it has survived when its only message is